Welcome, my friends, back to the fog, a place of pain, fear, and death, a realm where a wicked and malevolent god plays a cruel game of terror and despair with helpless survivors and horrifying killers. Music in this realm is somber and dark, a choir of screams and the crying of crows, an orchestra of clanking meat hooks and howling chainsaws. But there is another song that plays in the fog, the soft strumming of a guitar and a hopeful and beautiful voice that accompanies it. It sings of family, home, love, and hope. It draws survivors to it and offers warmth and respite. It is this voice that both fascinates and enrages the entity. Certainly, the entity takes pleasure in breaking the hope of survivors, so he longs to crush the spirited voice. But each time he tries, it sings all the louder. This is the voice of Kate Denson. When Kate Denson was in kindergarten, her class was taught a really cute song and she couldn't wait to go home and share it with her family. Seeing their smiling faces was the most wondrous experience she'd ever had, and it is the earliest memory even now. It was in that moment that Kate knew what she wanted to do, to use music to uplift other people's lives. She got her first guitar and took singing lessons, and by the time she was 8, she was performing for other people on stage. As she grew older, her mother helped her to travel around her home state of Pennsylvania and even as far south as Nashville, as she got a knack for old-time folk music and even country-style tunes. She participated in talent shows and competitions, and she often won. But winning wasn't what she wanted. It always made her feel guilty. Kate didn't share her songs and music to see people lose or to compete, but rather to make other people happy. For her to win meant that others had to lose, and that went against her musical goals. When she got old enough, she bought herself an old beat-up Chevy and drove across country to share her music with everyone she could, bringing joy, laughs, and smiles to everyone she could share them with. She formed friendships and relationships with fans all over who flocked to her music. However, she wasn't just all talk either. Kate liked to visit home when she could, sharing stories with the children in her town and singing for her family and friends at home. Time and fame, though, had started to make a change for Kate that she wasn't happy about. Traveling cross-country was, as it turned out, expensive. So to compensate, she began taking tips from her agent to try writing songs that were more crowd-pleasing, more fluff than substance. And she'd caved. Now she had more money, more jobs, more gigs, and yet Kate felt empty. She felt like the songs she was writing weren't entirely hers. So whenever she felt this way, she went to her favorite place. Deep in the woods was a small clearing, a depression in the earth where the trees grew ominously around it. This was her quiet place, to connect to her musical muse. This night, as she played and strummed her guitar in the clearing, she felt an odd inspiration come to her. Not quite her own. It was dark, mysterious, cold, and she didn't like it, and kept trying to move away from it. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the dark melody in her head. Following the source of the melody, she found her way to a cave with runes and sigils on it that looked unworldly, ancient, evil. She stumbled and suddenly saw something quite horrifying. Long spider-like limbs reaching out to claim her, to drag her away. She struggled and fought back, fleeing from the cave to her safe haven once more. But no sooner had she returned to her family clearing when the legs appeared again, and this time she couldn't escape. She felt the limbs dragging her away, into the canopy of fog above her, and into a realm she did not recognize. Kate Denson is probably my favorite survivor in terms of lore alone. I mean, I'm going to sound really bad for this, but please hear me out. A lot of the survivors here, with a few exceptions, come off as either kind of shitty people to me or they're cringe lore-wise. Then there are others whose design just irks me, as if they went to advertise their desire to break away from conformity, man. But Kate is a survivor whose lore and outlook feels genuinely wholesome. A girl who wants to share her music with others, travel the nation to sing for people, cares about her family and friends back home. I mean, sure, it might be a little stale, all things considered, but just to have one wholesome, hopeful character who doesn't have a ton of internal baggage or external threats is, for once, kind of a nice change of pace. And for that reason, while I can admit that Kate's story is a little stale, I can at least appreciate the story as being easier to read. It even makes sense, as a hopeful and optimistic person like her would be just the kind of person that the entity would want to break. And yet, it seems he's having a little trouble with this one. But let's talk about her perks. Kate's perks are, for the most part, okay. Hey, I never said people liked her for her perks. I think it's just her design that people like. Kate's perks are largely focused on evading the killer and fighting back when caught. Her perks are Dance With Me, Windows of Opportunity, and Boil Over. Dance With Me, when Kate performs a rush vault action or escapes a locker in a sprint for the next 3 seconds, she won't leave scratch marks. Now I know what you're thinking. What are scratch marks? For those who are unaware, scratch marks are red indicators that sprinting survivors leave behind that are invisible to the survivor, but visible to the killer, unless the survivor has a special perk to see the scratch marks, which I'm using here to help you see the perk in action. The perk has a cooldown of 40 seconds at max level, and it's a good way to potentially get killers off your tail in the chase. Sometimes it can be a lifesaver, but it does mean that you have to be careful about when you choose to rush your vault, so use it wisely. Next is Windows of Opportunity, and honestly, it's probably her best perk. You gain the ability to passively see the auras of all windows, pallets, and breakable walls, essentially letting you always be aware of key points of escape or opportunities to vault and make use of Dance With Me perk. I love this perk because if I'm working on a gen, I can be constantly aware of every potential escape route should I be interrupted. And in the chase, I am always near a point of interest. Very useful perk, and I highly recommend it. Now, Boil Over is essentially your last-ditch attempt to escape. While the killer is carrying you, you gain a few effects. While struggling in the killer's hold, the intensity of your struggle is increased by 80%, making it harder for the killer to maintain control of you while looking for a hook. Also, all hook auras within 16 meters of the killer are hidden from sight, helping you to buy you time for you to resist. And finally, if the killer drops from a high point while carrying you, your wiggling meter is filled instantly by 33%. I am sad to say, though, that Boil Over, while a good perk, has almost never been able to help me escape a killer successfully. Most killers are too familiar with hook locations, and the wiggling progress just takes too long for me to make use of it. I don't think it's a bad perk idea, but it's situational and not always trustworthy. It might be the only perk of Kate's I'd trade for something better. But with all that said, I gotta say I really like Kate. In terms of her lore, again, like I said, I acknowledge it's a little stale, but I like it for the most part. It's nice to finally have a wholesome, down-to-earth survivor, and I feel like those would be the kind of survivors that the entity would enjoy breaking the most. I think it's really cool to have sort of a country folk singer in here, since I'm a fan of country and folk. I like Kate's overall design. She looks genuinely attractive without trying too hard. I think that there are a lot of characters in the game that do definitely try too hard and not always to their betterment. And her perks, while nothing outstanding, I like most of them. In fact, I'd say that Windows of Opportunity is one of the must-get perks you should have so that you can have a better idea of where you're escaping to and how best to evade the killer. So genuinely, I do recommend them. But that takes care of Kate, and I've enjoyed talking to you about her. Stay tuned next time as we discuss the killer that came out with her, and he is no laughing matter. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time in the fog. Take care.
Keep it up, dude. I mean, only gonna let the other girl escape.